All right, let's talk about one of the most famous pieces of advice in history. It's something you hear everywhere, from generals to entrepreneurs, and for centuries, it's been treated like this fundamental law of success.
I mean, you know the one. You've probably even said it yourself. Fortune favors the bold. It sounds so powerful, doesn't it? So inspiring. It basically promises that if you just have enough courage, the universe will reward you.
But here's the big question we're tackling today. Is this actually timeless wisdom, or is it a really dangerous myth? Is it a reliable guide for life, or is it a trap that makes risk look glamorous while hiding a whole graveyard of failures? That's what we're going to find out.
Okay, so first up, let's really dig into the promise of boldness. I mean, why is this idea so powerful? Why has it stuck around for literally centuries?
What's really interesting here is that the classic argument for this proverb isn't about just being reckless. Not at all. As this definition shows, true boldness isn't just taking any risk. It's about acting despite your fear. But, and this is the key part, only when that action is justified by a real purpose. It's courage with a mission.
And this comparison here, it just nails the core difference perfectly. On one side, you've got the timid person who basically lives in this tiny familiar corridor, just trying not to fail. But then you have the bold person. They're not just living in the corridor, they're knocking down walls and widening it. They're creating more space, more surface area, you could say, for luck to actually find them. And look, the reason boldness often works isn't some kind of magic. It's actually pretty mechanical. Opportunities, they don't last forever. That confidence, it attracts people, it builds trust. And maybe most important of all, taking action gives you real-world information. You just can't sit around and think your way to every answer. Sometimes you have to move to see what happens.
We're all pretty good at calculating the risks of doing something, but what about the risk of doing nothing? We totally forget about that. And every small no, every chance you don't take, man, it adds up. The risk of just staying put is hidden, but it compounds over time, slowly closing doors you didn't even know were open.
Okay, but that's only one side of the coin. Now we have to flip it over and look at the skeptic's argument, the survivor story. This is where things get really interesting, because it suggests we've all been kind of fooled. And this quote, it just cuts right to the heart of the problem. History remembers the triumphant audacity of the few and discards the shattered audacity of the many. Wow. We build all our rules for success based on the winners we can see. But what about all the bold people who went for it and failed? We never hear their stories. So this leads us to a classic trap our brains fall into, called survivorship bias. We focus on the one person who succeeded, the one startup that made it big, and we think, that's the formula. But we completely ignore the vast, silent graveyard of all the others who tried the exact same thing and failed. We only see the survivor. And the consequences of thinking this way are actually pretty serious. We end up overpraising winners, right? We mistake pure luck for a repeatable strategy, and we start to moralize it, thinking that fortune chose the bold because they were more worthy or something, when in reality, randomness played a huge, huge role. So this brings us to a really important counter idea, the power of prudence. I mean, is boldness always the right move? The answer is a hard no, because sometimes being bold isn't a virtue at all. It's a huge liability. Just take a look at this. You definitely want a bold entrepreneur, right? Or a bold artist. But a bold surgeon? A bold pilot flying your plane? No way. In these high-stakes, super fragile systems, what you actually want is caution, precision, discipline. In those cases, praising boldness isn't just wrong, it's flat-out dangerous. So maybe there's a better proverb we should be using, one that's a little less glamorous. Fortune often favors those who avoid stupid risks. Doesn't have the same ring to it, I know, but there's a deep truth in there. Sometimes the best strategy isn't about making a giant leap, it's about not falling off the cliff. Just staying in the game is a win. Okay, so where does that leave us? Is boldness good or is it bad? Well, the answer isn't to pick a side. The smart move is to combine them into a better framework. Boldness with judgment. And this is the key idea right here. Asymmetric boldness. It's simple, really. Be bold when the worst thing that can happen is tolerable. Like a little embarrassment or a small financial hit, but the potential upside is huge. And be super cautious where the downside is total ruin, where failure means you're out of the game for good. So you see, the real skill isn't just being bold,
It's having the judgment to know the difference between a risk you can recover from and one that will take you out completely. It's not just about having the courage to act, it's about having the wisdom to know when and how.
So in the end, this whole thing isn't really about being timid versus being reckless. It's about being smart. The real question to ask yourself isn't, am I bold enough? The question is my boldness wise? So think about it for a second. In your own life, what's one intelligent risk you're ready to take? One where the upside is truly meaningful, but the downside, well, you'll live to fight another day. That might just be the perfect place to start.